Welcome to the Education and Empowerment Podcast. In this show, our hosts explore success and advancement through education by interviewing today's top leaders in the fields of education, business, and technology in order to provide insight into what it really takes to succeed. This show is brought to you by fourstay, a SaaS-enabled online booking marketplace for student and intern housing. fourstay provides turnkey, all-in-one, cloud-based accommodation software solutions for colleges, universities, and organizations. Learn more at offcampus.fourstay.com and landlords.fourstay.com. All right, let's get into the show.
You're tuned to Education and Empowerment Podcast. Yes, that is your host, Bakhtiyor Isoev. And today we have a very interesting interview with two amazing people, Nina Oduro and Carlhey Bolz. Nina Oduro is a senior advisor for youth and leadership at Irex, International Research and Exchanges Board, a nonprofit organization. She works across organizations' portfolio of global programs to catalyze the potential of youth and enhance the capacity of leaders to drive positive change. Nina brings experience in youth leadership and development, research, and training to her role leading strategy, technical capacity building, and external outreach on Irex's youth and leadership investments. Previously, Irex technical advisor for leadership, youth, and training, Nina Oduro supported leadership programs and the Center for Applied Learning and Impact initiatives on research, learning, and innovation. Prior to joining Irex, Nina began her career in youth leadership development and training at the Columbia University and the fourstay Foundation, where she trained young leaders to succeed socially and academically. She worked as an education advising specialist at the U.S. Embassy in Ghana and consulted for several global education initiatives, including Microsoft Education Ambassador Program. Her research work included leading international organization for migration and Nigerian government's Diaspora mapping project. Nina has been recognized as top 30 under 30 honoree by Future of Ghana and the Donor of the Year by Diaspora of African Women Network. She's a champion for diversity and inclusion. Her work for leveraging creative entrepreneurship for equity in the food and beverage industry has been featured on Voice of America, NPR, Washington City Paper, and more. Ms. Oduro received Master's in African American Studies with a concentration in African Diaspora Studies from Columbia University, and Bachelor's in Political and Social Thought from University of Virginia. Our another speaker is Carlhey Bolz, is a program officer with the Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative, Professional Fellows Program. In this role, Carlhey leads curriculum development and collaborates with partner organizations to design interactive learning experiences. She also manages the overall program events, communications, and the congressional engagement strategies. Before joining Irex, Carlhey worked at a global network that identifies, educates, and connects women-owned businesses to multinational buyers to diversify their supply chains. Previously, she co-managed a service learning program at Kauai, collaborating with community-based organizations to restore ecological diversity and to provide sustainability-grown food to local communities. Additionally, Carlhey spent over 2 years in Peru as Peace Corps volunteer, working with rural youth to promote leadership, gender equality, and higher education. Carlhey holds Masters of International Development Policy with specialization in Latin American and Caribbean Studies and Peace and Conflict Resolution from Sanford School of Public Policy at Duke University, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Psychology from University of Arizona. Carlhey is originally from Tucson, Arizona, and is an avid appreciator of live music, diverse cultures, and travel. In this episode, Ms. Oduro and Ms. Bolz and I will be discussing global youth empowerment and leadership perspectives. We will talk about their leadership experience in the programs that they are running at International Research and Exchanges Board that empower young people around the world. This is a very unique opportunity to hear from nonprofit leaders who create real social impact and have navigated during unprecedented times. All right, let's begin the episode. Hello, and welcome to the Education and Empowerment Podcast. My name is Bakhtiyor Isoev, and I'm your host for the show. In this episode, I'm honored to be speaking to two very wonderful people. Both of them work at International Research and Exchanges Board, Irex. And today, I'm speaking with Nina Oduro and Carlhey Bolz. Without further ado, Nina and Carlhey, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we wanted to get started by getting to know you better a little bit. And how'd you get into the field of young people empowerment?
Well, clearly we're both young people still, but I think for me, I've always been invested in supporting young people's development, because I find that when young people have been involved and are involved meaningfully in opportunity development, in shaping their own lives, they are better able to thrive in their communities. And I got involved when I was in college. I think, even before college, like volunteering stuff. But in college, I started to take on these internships in the summer. I worked at a summer camp. I wasn't a camp counselor because I was like not the one, but I was like at an office at a summer camp and helping sort of shape the programs. And I think that's translated to my work now. Obviously, that was in Virginia in the United States. But after college, I decided that I wanted to go abroad and do the same work and learn about youth opportunities outside of the United States. So I traveled to my home country in Ghana, worked with the U.S. Embassy there on education initiatives, and then, so on and so forth. But now ended up here where I get to bring all those experiences together to support youth around the world.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And Carlhey?
Yeah. For me, I think, as Nina mentioned, it's kind of one of these things that you lead into in some way, shape, or form due to your experiences. And for me, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Peru, where I worked on youth development in a small town in rural Peru in the Department of La Libertad, and really enjoyed my time there working directly with the youth and helping them develop different leadership skills. So that was kind of the onset of, I think, my time at Irex. But I studied international development policy after that and was really searching for a way to work in Latin America, but also with youth. And Irex didn't come into play quite yet. I was working at another organization that works with women entrepreneurs and helping diversify supply chains. And that was kind of my entryway into the entrepreneurship kind of ecosystem. And while I was a program at Irex, I saw an opportunity for me to kind of fuse these two interests together: Latin America and my experience with youth, and then also entrepreneurship. And so that's kind of how I came to be at Irex.
That's amazing. That's really powerful. And as I reflect, on myself, I do hear a lot of similarities. There's this travel bug, or the coach bug, or the mentor bug, or some sort of bug that really helps us kind of move on and inspire and empower young people. Which, on that note, I was hoping that, just for a moment and for the purposes of, educating, our audience, you could share your understanding of what is youth empowerment. Like, what does it mean? And maybe why is it important, maybe through the work that you do, or your general understanding of youth empowerment?
Yeah. So for me, youth empowerment at the core, I think youth empowerment is about equity. I truly believe that when we talk about empowering youth, it's about getting youth to be socially, economically included in the activities of the world with equal access and footing as anybody else to thrive. And I think when we start there, we recognize the differences that young people have to access to opportunities. And that's the bridge that empowerment does. Empowerment seeks to provide the disconnect in opportunities with young people that haven't had those opportunities, and also bridge the divide with young people that have had privileges that others don't. I think for me and the work that I've done in the past, I've noticed that a lot of our world is divided, and it starts when you're young. It starts from the home you come in, the school you go to, the opportunities you get. But when we bring young people together and we start focusing on how to bridge that it is one of the earliest points where we can start to break down those barriers. And I think that's what youth empowerment means, no matter what sector we're in, no matter which focus is trying to empower on. I think if we keep that in mind, we'll all be sort of coming together in achieving the similar goals.
That's fantastic. So equity, that's amazing. That's great. And Carlhey, what about you?
I don't know that I would add much to it. I feel like Nina's really kind of captured, the true sentiment of empowerment and success. The only thing I would add is that it's also about providing a space for leaders to kind of gain access to additional skill sets and opportunities in a way for them to then apply their knowledge and engage with like-minded peers. And so everything she said and a little bit more.
That's great. And it's interesting you both mentioned that because, with technology and with, globalization, the world is so big, but yet it's becoming, such a connected and such a comprehensive, place. And obviously with, last year's, the whole global pandemic caused a lot of challenges. And I'm sure, the field of empowering young people has its own challenges. What are the critical challenges that you're noticing these days?
I mean, the challenges are tremendous. And I think what the pandemic really did, as we all saw, is that it amplified challenges that we were already aware of, but it made us more acute and in a way that we can ignore. One of those would be youth resilience and well-being. At the height of the pandemic, we see young people struggling with their mental health, and the CDC just came out with a report that showed that 63% of young people were suffering from anxiety in the United States at a higher rate than, before the pandemic. The other thing is that it exacerbated inequities in race, class, things that were apparent to us just by the fact of who had to work on the front lines, who didn't, who was at the grocery store, who wasn't. And young people are part of that. They're not, who had access to internet, who didn't. And I think these are all the ways in which, the pandemic exposed and put things in our faces that were already there and made it apparent that we need to address things now, that it shouldn't take a pandemic to exacerbate inequities so that we can all feel bad, that these things are problems there that should be part of our daily work to solve, and not just in our programs. How do we engage with governments? How do we engage with local communities? How do we empower each other outside of our work, to also be part of our communities that are solving these challenges? These are all things that, it's not just young people facing, adults are facing too, but we see that young people have less choices, less agency, because our society is shaped in a way where they cannot always choose different. And we need to really focus on them in order for them to thrive.
Yeah, I think COVID brought through this kind of isolation that we've never really seen before. And communities that were already considered to be kind of on the fringes or marginalized have continued to be so. And now, maybe city centers are receiving assistance and resources, but those don't always trickle down to those other areas. And so, those are still challenges youth in those communities have had to kind of overcome. I would also say in general, just if you're looking at the entrepreneurial context, access to resources, access to funding, access to opportunities that will help someone scale their business or learn the skills they need in order to better their business organization or their community. All those things remain, and COVID has definitely contributed to those same barriers.
I agree with you. And one of the things that I noticed that, in the national development community, including organizations like yours, have done a tremendous work, both, inside United States and outside. So I was hoping that you could tell us more about the work that you do at Irex, maybe what Irex does in general, and the programs that you're involved in that hopefully offer some solutions to the problems that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think, that's right. I think one of the beauties about working at Irex is that we're always trying to find solutions and avenues for young people to thrive. And we're also researching this. So, we're learning from our work every day. And my role at Irex as a senior advisor for youth and leadership is to work across our over 40 programs across the organization that serve youth as either the specific primary beneficiaries of our work or secondary. Maybe it's through the teachers that we work with that then benefit the youth. And so we have the breadth of programs, but each of them are quite, there's some similarities and there's some differences. Sometimes we work within education institutions. Sometimes we're working outside of them, such as the program that Carlhey will tell you a little bit about, where it's with entrepreneurs and youth entrepreneurs. What it really exposes for anyone is that, and the opportunity that we get to do is that there's a whole ecosystem that supports youth, right? Youth are the ones at the center that we want to focus on, but there's those around them that support them, the teachers, the governments, the other institutions that are part of it, the businesses, working all together and working with them in the ways that they need to then serve youth is so important. And my job really is the fun part. I get to connect all the dots when I can by supporting the teams with curriculum or, helping us sort of channel our work and package it in ways where both young people can understand it, but also our funders or donors and, the listeners here today.
That's amazing. That's great. Carlhey, please.
Yes. So I'm a program officer on the YLI team. YLI stands for Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative, and it's a fellowship program that brings around 280 entrepreneurs to the U.S. and connects some of the U.S. businesses here to help kind of forge ties and business connections and build that network. Along with that is a curriculum, which actually Nina had a big hand in helping develop, but I lead the curriculum and the events and communications for the team. And so part of my job is to work with advisors like Nina and also with our fellows and program partners and all of the stakeholders involved to create something that's going to provide them with the skills and resources that are going to help them with their businesses after the program. So yeah, that's kind of my main role.
What's interesting is I find it very empowering myself to listen to, the work that you do. And, I'm just curious for a moment to explore and maybe help our listeners to get into your shoes of March, 14, 2020, and, how COVID impacted the programming that you do. Can you just give us a little story into what happened and how you navigated there? And I see very good smile on your faces. So that's great.
Would you like me to jump in on this? Yes. I think YLI is a really great example of how Irex can support a lot of really innovative thinking kind of quickly. If I'm going back to March of last year, we had just actually launched our pre-departure orientation and we're planning for this cohort of fellows to come in country, and they would have been in country in June. So it was just a couple months before then, and it really just kind of halted all of our work at the time. With so much uncertainty, it was kind of difficult to fully grasp how things were truly going to change. In this case, the YLI team came together and went through a design thinking process where first we started with kind of like brainstorming what are the ideas of what we could do to pivot our program from an in-person program to a fully virtual program, and how do we address the concerns of our stakeholders. And so there were a lot of kind of meetings we set up, informational interviews with our stakeholders, including alumni of the program, current fellows that were waiting to come and be a part of the program, and our program partners, our host organizations and cohort ambassadors, and all of these people that are involved with making this program happen. And, really have a conversation with them about how we can shift the program and still address their needs and address their concerns as we're going through the redesign of a program. So there was a lot of stakeholder engagement and discussions. And then it was an ideation and strategy session to see how do we implement this plan and these ideas that we've come up with that still align with the goals and the mission of the program, because those stay true regardless of, whether it's in person or if it's virtual. Those goals are still the core of the program. And so that's what we did. Of course, that took, all of these things took place over a couple of months. But in the meantime, we were able to launch a 3-part series that we called the Crisis Response Module, where we were able to address some of the more immediate needs of our fellows who really needed some assistance on how to handle their businesses during this time of uncertainty. So that was kind of like, what was going on. There's obviously more to the story, but I think we'll probably kind of address some of those things as we go along. Nina, if there's anything you'd like to add.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I know that while I was going through that pivot, other programs were doing something similar. Across our programs, we're able to learn from each other. And so during and even now, what the YLI program has been doing, what they've learned is inform and implement, as things change. We're also going back to in person now. So, things are going to have to change again.
That's amazing. And, something very critical that you mentioned that really resembles with the work that, we do at fourstay. Last year when this happened, we've, gone through a very similar, process where we needed to take a step back and to reflect on, what was important to the different organizations and colleges and universities that we work with. And I think you summed it up very powerfully that it was a pivot. Its ability to pivot very quickly, but at the same time, stay in line with, what's the mission and what's the vision and what partners really valued. Which makes me think of, next very important thing that I think, our listeners would appreciate is, when you were looking at these programs, what sort of measurements did you find to be useful? So if this type of, pandemic or any type of crisis, were to happen, what would you measure to see if your programs are still successful?
I think in YLI's case, it depends on the component we're looking at. For the curriculum pieces, we were really looking at engagement and learning outcomes. Were fellows reacting to the information that we were putting out there? Were they participating? Were they active? Were they sharing their experience beyond that? And I think there were meeting points with different fellows throughout, but the goal was to help them, and get some information to them during a time in which they didn't know, how to shift their own businesses. So even program aside, as entrepreneurs, they were focused on, their livelihoods, if that's what their business is doing. But as far as the outcomes, I think we were looking at engagement numbers. We were within each session providing, general standard questions that could help us see if we needed to, within that pivot, actually change or adjust any of the information that we were providing. Were they looking to identify opportunities in a dynamic market, or were they searching for revenue strategies and forecasting? And how can we adjust what we're doing in real time to kind of help them address those issues? So it can be kind of mixed as far as the outcomes go, but in the particular crisis response module, we were looking for kind of learning outcomes.
I think one thing I would add too is Irex has been really invested in learning about network development. While we're going to virtual, one of the key things on our minds that we believe that leadership is built not only through opportunities and capabilities that we're able to develop in individuals, but also the networks and that they're able to connect with and build. So we were quite concerned that if people were going totally virtual and our programs are totally virtual, the ways in which we've done in the past has either been hybrid, virtual and in person, or blended. And so what did that mean for that network development? So we invested in measuring network development in virtual learning. So one of our programs, Community Solutions Program, we used it as our test case basically to measure that. And we just, one of the learnings from that is that network development in virtual learning is possible. And you have to create specific types of activities that enable more connection in order for it to be effective. And so that was great because now we can say, okay, we're not taking this away, but we may have to restructure and redesign our programming to include more intentional connection points that may not just be about content development when we're having virtual. So that's one of the things that we've been really thinking about. How do we maintain that network development element, especially since it's part of our view on leadership development?
And, I totally find it very useful as I'm speaking to so many people in the field. Those are, very similar outcomes and findings that they're having. Would you attribute network development and, relationship building or network effects, so to speak, to the best lessons learned out of the pandemia and how to run these programs? Or Are there any additional findings or perhaps trends that you see coming up?
I mean, network development is definitely one. I know Carlhey has a host of others that she might want to mention, but definitely I wouldn't take network development out, especially, I mean, you imagine that with virtual, or assume that you may lose something in human connection. We always envision that. And while that is true in the process in which we're used to human in connection, I always say we need to be more open-minded about that process being different and yet having outcomes that maybe enrich something different than we thought. So yes, there is some loss, but I think that network development is not totally, eliminated. And we're learning how to figure out the best practices to enable it to be strengthened in programming.
Yeah, and just to kind of add to that piece, I think that moving forward, like as a society, people will be much more open to having these virtual connections, and they'll be more in tune with, intentional space for that to happen virtually. Just because of this experience with COVID and a lot of people having to shift to virtual work and having to get used to these platforms and, kind of being introduced to them as the way that you create these connections. Additional best practices I think that are important to bring up in this context would be to make sure that you are incorporating the voices of your attendees, whether that's your fellows or students or program partners. Make sure you're bringing them into the conversation, because it does contextualize things for the other attendees, and it provides them with an opportunity to really showcase anything that they've learned, either as a part of the program or as alumni of the program. So that's, I think, something that's important to bring to the forefront. And of course, things, Nina mentioned something about adjusting some of the programming. I think a multimedia approach is important. Bring in videos, bring in some storytelling, use the kind of engagement tools that are out there to your advantage. In some of our events, we included like testimonial booths or photo booths and different things that you might not be able to bring into all of your in-person events, but are pretty easily streamlined in a virtual platform.
And since we're talking about, global best practices, I was very inspired to see, an article the other day that there are new programs and organizations coming out in, other countries of like, Eurasia, and the, old programs are being revamped to, cater for more. And if you were to address, your colleagues, overseas, for the ones and for the listeners who are interested in perhaps, starting a new program or, initiative to empower young people through the different programming, what advice would you give? And, what would you say is the biggest area of opportunity right now that they should capitalize on?
I'll definitely echo what Carlhey just said. Include the young people. Let them tell you what are their needs, what are their gaps. That's a lot of times we get to start with that. We get to start with asking the potential participants or sourcing a group that is similar to potential participants and saying, what are the challenges? What are the needs? And hearing from them themselves. I think that is invaluable and so central to actually having a successful program that meets the needs of the people that are going to be involved. Not only does it do that, I think the idea of youth-driven solutions and innovation is critical. A lot of times adults are designing and, it's our job and we feel so important to do this. And really, a lot of young people are very capable of contributing meaningfully. And oftentimes our main focus is empowerment, and yet we don't empower young people to voice what they can do and how they can do to support that process in the best way. So I think re-envisioning that will be very, very important. The other thing I would say as an opportunity is also technology and the rapid changes we're seeing are one challenge. It's one, a challenge, but two, an opportunity. And when we think about young people and their ability to learn quickly, adapt quickly, it is an area where we can all be thinking about how to invest more in to engage young people, but also to bridge the gap in access where young people don't have access to technology, don't have access to the devices that they need to be engaging in a fast changing world. How can we bridge that? And then innovate. Young people have ideas. They're brilliant. And if only we give them the opportunities to showcase that more, we might be able to solve some of the critical challenges that we see in the world today. And I think programs that enable that kind of interaction are only positioning young people to lead now and in the future. And I think oftentimes I hear, you are the leaders of tomorrow. I think you are the leaders of now is the mindset that we need to have, because I don't think innovation, I don't think, solutions have an age limit, old or young. I think, senior citizens can be innovative. I think youth can be innovative. And I think this is where we have the gaps. And I think that the problems of today and the future require all of us to work together.
This is mind-blowing. This is really mind-blowing. That's great.
Someone should write that down, Nina. Leaders, the leaders of now, really, I think that really captures your point just super succinctly. I think the youth of today are the most flexible and adaptable, and use that to your advantage. If you're a young leader, a young entrepreneur, use that skill set and apply it wherever you can. Right now, I think with the fact that everything has kind of moved to this virtual setting, it takes down a lot of the barriers that were there, especially around things like cost or connection. You now can meet with people globally, and it's normalized to do that virtually. So, I think going back to Nina's point, we're really looking at how we can make youth the center of every approach and the center of every program moving forward.
I'd like to echo that. About a year ago, before COVID, we were working on a delegation from Japan, an association of different universities that were interested in possibly learning how to use technology in student housing and transform the way housing happens to them. And I was really surprised to learn that students in Japan still go to the information board to pick up a flyer and actually go visit a place before they actually find a place or before they actually book a place. Technology, as you mentioned, the connection and the cost is so important. And at fourstay, we, on a day-to-day basis, we see so many different stories and wonderful stories of how, a student or a scholar or a young person was able to find housing just in a matter of clicks. And I think this what you just said, it applies throughout all other industries as well. As you said, the leaders of today as well as tomorrow are both important, and we really look forward to inspiring them and empowering them. And as we wrap up our episode, I was hoping that you could leave us with a piece of wisdom or advice or a quote that's very important.
Sure. I was going to share one of the testimonial quotes we've pulled from one of our kind of events. And this is a YLI fellow. It's anonymous, but it says, "We are problem solvers. It's all about your mindset and how you look, think, and act on it." So really thinking about any challenges that are out there, there's got to be a way around it.
I would say to any young person, what I would say too is there's power in you, but there's more power in us. And that as a leader, an individual, you can do a lot, but as a community, as a world, you can do way more. Find the people that know more than you. I always say that are smarter than you, and work with them to achieve some of the challenges and solve some of the goals and make tremendous impact. And I think that's what we do this work for. And anytime you find your people, you achieve way more. So good luck.
Thank you for having us on the show and letting us share a little bit about, some of the work that Irex does. And thank you to all listeners out there. Hopefully you guys are looking to make a change.
That's great. That's great. On behalf of Education and Empowerment Podcast, as well as our sponsor, fourstay.com, I appreciate your time and inspiration that you gave. This is really mind-blowing. I've actually learned more frameworks to think about and to reflect upon as I continue to inspire young people. So thank you so much for your time. And until our next show, we'll see you next time.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Education and Empowerment Podcast. This show is brought to you by fourstay, a SaaS-enabled online booking marketplace for student and intern housing. fourstay provides turnkey, all-in-one cloud-based accommodation software solutions for colleges, universities, and organizations. Learn more at offcampus.fourstay.com and landlords.fourstay.com.